What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I am bringing you guys my opinion, my 2 cents, my thoughts on shooting ProRes Raw with the Atomos Ninja V and the Zcam E2-S6. This right here is my Zcam E2-S6. This is exactly the setup that I shot the entire intro to this video on. I used the Sigma 18-35 art lens paired up with this Tilta mini matte box. Inside the matte box, I was using the Prism Lens Effects Dream Filter. I stripped everything off the camera and I just ran a small MPF battery. And of course, I was using the Atomos Ninja V to record ProRes Raw. So for those of you who are wondering what my setup looked like for this video, because I know a lot of you guys like to see my rig and how I configure everything, here it is. You're welcome. So before we get into the thick of things, guys, I just want to say that everything that is about to come out of my mouth is my opinion, and all of us have our own opinions. We all work differently, we all shoot differently, we all edit in different NLEs. So what I think about shooting ProRes Raw and my opinion on it could be completely different to you. So before you rip me in the comments down below, just know that this is my opinion, and hopefully my opinion will help some of you guys make a better decision as to whether or not you need to go out and buy a Ninja V to shoot ProRes Raw, or if you already have a Ninja V, if ProRes Raw is even worth it, or whatever the case may be. So just take that with a grain of salt, and let's get into the video. So for those of you that don't know, recently, within the last couple of weeks, Atomos put out a firmware update for the Ninja V that allows you to shoot ProRes Raw with all of the Zcam cameras. So with all of the flagship Zcam cameras, the S6, the F6, and the F8, you can record up to 5.8K RAW over HDMI. So before we get down to the nitty gritty and I tell you my opinions about ProRes Raw, I think it's important for you all to understand what ProRes Raw actually is. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you what it is because I really just don't know. Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand how ProRes Raw works. So fortunately enough, Caleb Pike from DSLR Video Shooter has a great 3-part series on his YouTube channel where he kind of deep dives into what ProRes Raw is, how to shoot it, how to edit it, and what you need to do so. I will leave a link down below in the description for you to go and check out his part 1 video, which is him explaining what ProRes Raw actually is, because I can't, and I think it's more beneficial if you go just watch him talk about it, because he is insanely smart and he knows what the frig ProRes Raw is. So with that being said, let's just jump right into it, and I'm gonna start with the pros of shooting ProRes Raw. The first pro that I have on my list right here, as you can see, I got a little list on my phone. The first pro of shooting in this RAW format is that it's 12-bit. It's 12 bits of freaking goodness, and 12 bits can be really beneficial for a lot of us in the editing suite when you're trying to push and pull colors around. That is really a huge pro, especially if you're shooting like a short film and you need to like replicate a certain look. Like if you're going for a Matrix look or like a Blade Runner look and you really want to manipulate the colors in post to get it to look a very certain and specific way, 12-bit color depth will allow you to do so without falling apart and looking like complete crap. So another huge benefit of using this ProRes Raw codec is that it just works like freaking butter inside of Final Cut Pro. And I'm a Final Cut Pro user, so it just makes me really happy, and it puts a huge smile on my face when I can sit there and get through an entire edit without the freaking colorful pinwheel of death. I hate that stupid little pinwheel that I get in Final Cut sometimes when I'm trying to edit like H.265 footage or even some footage out of the Sony cameras. Like with ProRes, that doesn't happen nearly ever, and it is absolutely beautiful. Now, I can't really speak too much about how it works in Premiere or DaVinci Resolve or whatever NLE that you edit in, but if you're a Final Cut user, just know that you will be in freaking heaven when these files import into your timeline. Like, it is just, it's butter, straight butter. So another huge benefit about using the Ninja V to record ProRes Raw is that you're actually recording all of your media onto SSD drives, and as we all know, SSDs are pretty dang affordable and you get a pretty good amount of space. For instance, I have a 256 gig Samsung SSD that I think I paid like 80 or 90 bucks for on Amazon. I'll leave a link to it down in the description below if you're interested in that SSD, but you can get up to like a terabyte SSD for a pretty affordable cost, and it's way cheaper than something like a CFast card, which is what Zcams take for media. With those 3 things being said, honestly, I think for me personally, those are the only pros that I see about using this system. Now, unfortunately, I have more cons than I do have pros, and that's exactly what I want to talk to you guys about, because ProRes Raw may not be the best option for you, like I don't think it is for me. So the first con that I'm going to talk to you guys about is the massive freaking file sizes that come off of the Ninja V. Like, it is absolutely insane how big these files are. I'm using a 256 gig SSD and I'm only getting like 15 minutes recording in ProRes Raw, which is absolutely absurd. Like, that's ridiculous. Those files are massive and they just take up so much space. And so that means I need to buy more hard drives. I need to buy more SSDs to record to. And now I'm just adding more things to my workflow that I need to worry about. And it's just a bit of a hassle having files that friggin' big. So the second con that I want to talk to you guys about is the highlight retention and the highlight roll off when shooting in ProRes Raw. Now, I have heard a bunch of people say that the highlight retention rate with ProRes Raw is not that good, and I am here to report that it is not that good. And unfortunately, that's a huge con, because you want your highlights to look good. Even the blown out parts of your highlights, you want to look good. And unfortunately, the blown out parts of the highlights with ProRes Raw look like really, really blown out. And me personally, I don't think it looks that great. Yesterday when I went out to shoot the intro to this video with my girlfriend, I was actually exposing for the highlights. I don't really like my highlights to be blown out, because I think it makes your image look less professional and less cinematic. So I would rather crush the blacks and just say bye to the shadows and just have all the highlight detail, because I just think it looks better. Now, yesterday when I was shooting, I was trying my best to expose for the highlights and keep that sky in, but unfortunately, you do get those little parts of the sky that still blow out if they're too close to the sun, and I don't think it really looks that good in ProRes Raw. I really don't, and it's just a con. Now, maybe I was exposing it wrong. Maybe I could have underexposed it more, or I'm not exactly sure. I've never really worked with ProRes Raw, so it could just be a learning curve on my part, but you know, in my experience shooting ProRes Raw these past couple of times that I've messed with it, I do not think the highlights look that good. So the next negative that I'm going to talk to you guys about is the ISO limit when shooting in ProRes Raw. For those of you that don't know, the S6 has a dual native ISO system. So the first native ISO is 400, and then the second native ISO is 1250. With that technology inside of the camera, this S6 is incredible in low light. I honestly think it's better than my Sony, but when you're shooting in ProRes Raw, the ISO caps at 6400. So you only get the range from 400 to 6400, and to me, that's just a negative. This next con that I'm going to talk about is honestly why I am probably never going to use ProRes Raw, and that is because of the VFR limitations, the variable frame rate limitations you have when shooting in ProRes Raw. The E2-S6 is a 6K Super 35 size sensor, so when shooting ProRes Raw, you have the option to be able to shoot in 5.8K or 4K. Now, why this is such a con is because you can only shoot up to 30 frames per second in 5.8K. The minute you switch over to shooting in 4K or Cinema 4K, you crop in on the sensor, and to me, sensor crops are so friggin' annoying when you're out shooting, because I could be shooting at 18mm on my Sigma 18-35, and as soon as I switch over to 4K to get, you know, a shot in 60 frames per second, my image crops in, and that is just an annoyance, because now I need to switch out my lens to get something even wider on there. And I just personally hate dealing with crop factors on cameras. It is just a headache, it's a hassle, and it adds more unnecessary bullshit to your workflow when you're out on set shooting that you need to think about. So another thing that we have to think about when shooting ProRes Raw is that the monitor is actually recording the image that it sees on screen. So your camera cannot display any info over HDMI, or else the info, like if you look at the back of your screen right now, sorry, I'm looking at my Sony screen, I have all of my info, my f-stop, my shutter speed, my ISO values, all of that stuff is displayed on screen. But when you're shooting ProRes Raw, if you have that displayed on screen, it gets baked into your footage. So this is another huge flaw and negative for me personally, because when I'm shooting on the S6, many of you know that the only screen on the camera is this little 1-inch LCD screen, so I have to keep looking at this tiny little screen to adjust my white balance, make sure that my settings are good when I'm going through the menus, and nothing displays on the monitor and it is just a clean feed, which can be good in some situations, but for me that's a negative because now I have to look at this tiny little 1-inch screen. So the last con that I want to talk with you guys about is that all of the media is recorded externally, which, I mean, it could be a good thing, but for me personally, it's a bad thing because the way that I shoot, sometimes when I'm out running and gunning and I'm rushing around and I'm trying to get a shot in like a tight area, I could bump, you know, my HDMI cable, or I could even maybe get it caught on something and pull it out. And if that happens, you just lost your footage, and who knows, maybe the SSD drive might format. I don't know, but to me, that just seems really sketchy, and I would much rather have all of my media recorded internal to the body because it's just safer. So with all that being said, there's just way too many cons versus pros, in my opinion, for me personally, that I don't think I'm going to be using ProRes Raw, especially if I can't shoot high frame rate without a crop on the sensor, and that to me is just the biggest annoyance of them all. So unless ProRes and Zcam can update the firmware on these two pieces of equipment to make higher frame rates happen, then maybe I'll give it a second chance. But as of right now, I just feel much safer recording internal to my CFast cards in ProRes high quality, because honestly, I think the ProRes HQ files that come out of the internal of the camera versus the ProRes RAW files from the Ninja V are so close in quality that, to me personally, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. It's very negligible, the amount of detail that is there between the two codecs. If you do own a Ninja V and you have a Zcam and you like shooting ProRes RAW, then keep shooting ProRes RAW. That is completely fine. I'm not saying not to, but for me personally, I just don't think it's really worth it. Now, am I gonna sell my Ninja V? Probably not, because who knows, if this firmware update is possible and they drop higher frame rates and I can implement this into my workflow some way that I can make it work, then maybe it will be beneficial for me to have. Also, I think the Ninja V is a really good monitor to have if you shoot on a mirrorless body like the EOS R, the Panasonic GH5, the S1, the S1H, and I mean, let's be honest, we all saw the rumors from the new A7S III, and they're saying 4K 120 ProRes RAW over HDMI. So, I don't know. I think that if you shoot on a mirrorless body, the Ninja V is much more appealing because you can get a much better and beefier codec out of a small mirrorless body. And I think the ProRes codec, in and of its own, is a beautiful codec to work with. It just works good in your editor, and it has a ton of information. It's got a good bit rate. So, those are the types of cameras where I think the Ninja V is more value for you. Did that make sense? I think it's more of a value for you to use it on those cameras, but with the Zcam, personally, I don't think I'm going to be using it because the ProRes internal inside the body to a CFast card is just so good. So I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. I am sorry for talking your ear off about some nonsense. I know I can ramble a lot, but that's about it. I'm gonna leave it right there. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, make sure to comment down below in the description of this video. I will try to get back to all of your comments. If you don't like the video, drop a thumbs down. It's whatever. Let me know why you didn't like it. If you did like it though, please hit the thumbs up button. It is a huge help for me in the channel. Lets the channel grow, lets new people find the channel. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions about Zcam in particular, follow me on Instagram at MacOLink. I answer all of my DMs, so if you want to get in contact with me and talk a little bit more about pieces of gear, hit me up on Instagram, and that's about it, guys. I'm done. Peace.